Yes, I was replying to a comment just before we came on. So I have kind of fallen into Substack a little bit, a bit hard, and I've been enjoying the
Right.
experience there because there's a lot of kind of neurodiverse voices
Yes.
in that space. So it's a really good place for me to be, seeing I'm kind of slipping into that and bringing the ecological approach to neurodiverse individuals because it seems that they perceive opportunities that are slightly outside of the norm a little easier sometimes for some unknown reason. Do I get why? No. But I was reading an article yesterday. No, just like a few minutes before, and I was like, "Oh, you are so close to the ecological approach." It was like that.
Reading an article about it or reading a conversation about it?
Reading it was a Substack
Oh,
post
like
about
a
it.
newsletter thing.
Yes, yeah, one of
Right,
their
right.
posts.
I wasn't sure if it was a chat in Substack or whether it was an actual
No,
post.
it was a post talking about their experience because this person in particular has been ex kind of doesn't necessarily follow the same approaches that everyone says, and is like, why do we treat it as a negative thing that we have to fix? Like the whole narrative around they have ADHD, and but they don't treat it as a narrative around we are this person, we are struggling, why, and has been hit back quite aggressively about it, and has been treated pretty badly. And I was like, yeah, that's why I like you, because
Interesting. What, as in like they shared the newsletter Substack and then people responded on Substack saying they disagree.
not even that. It's just people like your. It's the same terms that often gets thrown around when someone thinks about neurodiversity differently. It's, oh, you're I can't even think of the words. It's the you don't understand. It's the
Emotional responses.
emotional
Yeah.
responses about how you don't understand. You're pathologizing, and in fact, the entire
Defensive nature of the identity that people have associated with being neurodiverse and being different. Yeah.
exactly. And so I was reading an article because I found their experience interesting, and their just the title, "The Architecture of My Mind: An Ecological Approach to Self-Discovery," and I was like, "Hmm, hello." And they were using a term called cognitive ecology, which I was like,
Right. Did they come up with this term?
I don't know whether they came up with this term.
Have you reached out
Just
to them?
that's I've left a comment.
Okay, yes, please. I would love to have a conversation.
Yeah, a cognitive
Come
ecology.
over to
Yes.
the side.
Yeah, and I was like, you are this close. And it was really interesting to read, hence why I was a bit late, because I was like, I'm going to reply, hey, this could be a much longer conversation. Here's the ecological approach. Here's ecological psychology. You may find this very interesting.
How did you say here it is? What did you do? Did you reference the podcast, reference a book, an article, a video, a
I
quick
gave,
summary, or
yeah, I gave a very quick summary, ranging, literally just going straight in at Gibson of like direct perception versus indirect perception, as that's the easiest one, I think, to
jump
start
in the
people
deep
off.
end?
Oh yeah, it's like because I think in because from a neurodiverse approach and percept, like if we look at it from a neurodiverse kind of thing, whatever lens,
Social
constraint,
construct.
social
Yeah,
construct,
the social
like
constructs that they've constrained themselves to. Yeah.
yeah. So if we look at it from that constraint, what are the behaviors that ADHD people commonly exhibit? They go and do one thing, perceive something else, start doing that other thing, then they perceive another thing and
They
another
tend
thing.
to pay more attention to something else,
They
but
pay more attention to something.
yeah.
Like they just move from thing to thing,
Hmm.
but that's perceived as bad. When what is it?
Hmm. Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
it?
I was having a similar conversation the other day. Like, oh, but they can't pay attention. I'm like, yeah, but they're always paying attention. No, they just go from this thing to this thing to that thing. I'm like,
That's paying
yeah.
attention. It's just they see different things and they just perceive different opportunities for action and they are just doing the thing that they want to do because that makes sense because that's how we operate and ha ha.
It's like
And so
if you've got a goal and then your goal changes, what happens to your attention? It changes.
yeah.
Like,
And so
duh.
I had a very quick brief response of like, hey, so love this because it's interesting because they're coming at it from a completely different angle. They're using all of the terms in a different way. And I'm like,
As in
hi.
buzzword terms,
Yeah. So they're talking about self-regulation, which is like, okay, good.
self-organization. Yeah.
And they did say self-organization. And then they started going like how other systems helped me understand myself. They started talking about human design, Enneagram, astrology, like INFJ,
Yeah.
like, and how all of those come into it. And I'm like, okay,
Very
that's
close.
close.
But I think that's as close as you're going to get unless someone looks for ecological
Yeah.
psychology.
Yeah. Which is why I was like, hi, yes. And they mentioned things like integral theory, which is
Hmm.
cognition as a layered evolving system.
Like I
Um,
say, it's as close as
like,
you can get unless you
yeah,
look for ecological psychology.
yeah. And it is so interesting. So I was like, I'm gonna have to reply immediately because
So
it's like,
I think that is probably the best case study anyone from ecological psychology looking for popular science, looking into popular science, i.e. us, could use. Like, what are they looking for? What videos, what content, what articles, what conversations can we have? Can we engage in? Can we do to nudge people towards exploring ecological psychology as an idea? Not saying this is the right answer, but saying, hey, here's some thoughts and ideas. If you come across this, the various frameworks and platforms and methods that people use from traditional cognitive psychology and say, well, actually, ecological psychology thinks about it in this way and would use these terms and explanations to describe these behaviors and decisions that we're making. Maybe that is something worth exploring.
because
Because
that's
putting
so
everything under ecological psychology requires people to know the term.
yeah. And I think that's been that's where I'm kind of working now is trying to figure out how to take all of that. And it's quite exciting. Like just seeing someone who is
Can you
not
send me a link?
yeah, I can.
Because it's Substack, so it's on the cloud, so I can read through it when I'm meant to be doing loads of other things. It's not like I'm a busy person at all.
Oh,
So yeah.
that's okay. You can only do one thing at a time.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. I can't read through this article whilst I'm talking at you and watching you put your cup down.
No,
Okay.
no, of course not. No. We are single-minded individuals that can only do one thing at a time.
Definitely, definitely. Okay, I like the way that they've laid out the article. I'm not a
Mm,
fan of some of the terms in the titles, but that's understandable considering it's coming from cognitive psychology. And it seems
yeah.
to have had a fair amount of reactions. I want to know how many followers they have now. I'm curious. I'm exploring whilst talking. But yeah, so what are your, I guess, gut reactions? What's your feeling for their exploration of the science that they're at the moment?
For me, I'm
Because
just excited.
only
Like,
416. Hmm.
yeah, I know. I am fairly excited because this is kind of part of what I want to do and want to expose the neurodiverse world to this because it pulls away from the it provides an alternative to the oh shit, my life is shit, everything's shit, there's nothing I can do. Because when we perceive indirectly, we are controlled by an external force or an internal force in our brain that we have zero control over, that is nothing more than just a concept that was put in place because we couldn't understand fully what the brain does and how it operates and how it interacts with the world.
I would add a small caveat there. We still don't.
I was about to say that too. We still don't, and yet now the assumption is that the popular assumption is we have a central executive, even though it's a conceptual rag bag, which I just love saying. Every
Mm.
single time I say it, it gives me a bit
It's a
of a smile.
placeholder.
Yeah, it's just a placeholder. It's just a
So,
thing we say.
so here's something for you to explore because I was exploring this recently in the Discord. Uh, Conscious, subconscious, unconscious. If the central executive doesn't exist, which we assume it doesn't, are there subconscious or unconscious experiences?
Not really, no.
So when you're asleep, are you conscious?
Yeah, yeah.
How can you measure that?
Well, I still breathe.
Uh-huh. And this is something that's interesting to me when I think about this. When people say conscious and unconscious and subconscious, a lot of time it's directed at awareness. I think I went to define this right before you came into the Zoom. So, consciousness is your awareness of your thoughts, memories, feelings, sensations, and environments. It is a state of being awake or awakened to an inner realization of a fact, a truth, a condition, etc. Being conscious means having mental faculties not dulled by sleep, faintness, or stupor, whatever that says, which I don't disagree with the word said, but I feel my meaning behind all of that is drastically different. The reason I say that is when we're asleep, we still act, we still behave, we still move, and I would argue we still perceive.
Yes.
And if we're still perceiving, we are living organisms.
Mm. I think maybe the misunderstanding with because at first my reaction would be no, we don't perceive because our eyes are closed, but perception is not sight only. It's not just seeing.
But
We we use seeing because it's a common it's commonly understood, but there it's a perceptive system. It's a bunch of things. It's movement and how we move and how we see our body moving and feel our body. It's all of those things which we do perceive in our sleep.
what I think the argument would be is, well, if you walk with with your eyes closed, you're still awake. Whereas when you're asleep, you're not awake. You're not conscious. And I think conscious and awake are different things. I think there are different meanings there.
Yeah.
I feel that when you are asleep, you are still conscious because if something was to happen, you would still act and move accordingly,
Yeah.
which means you're still perceiving whilst asleep. When you're awake, there is more attention being paid to specifying information. There is more or less attention depending on where we as organisms are focused. If we
Mm,
are focused on an experience that is different from specifying information that is right in front of us, for example, when you're thinking about something in the past, as we would describe it, you're still detecting information in the here and now, but you're not paying attention to that information as much, but you're still
mm,
awake.
mm,
And I feel it's the same when describing the experience of being asleep. You're still perceiving asleep. You're just not paying attention to the specifying information that the body is detecting as much.
mm,
And that is a dynamic that shifts and changes, which is why I think it's a way that we could potentially explain the body clock and the body clock waking up at certain times of the day.
mm.
Like when you, for example, have an early flight in the morning and you set your alarm for 5:30, some people's body, mine, wakes up at 5 o'clock. Why in the world would it wake up at 5 o'clock? How does it know? How can I know? I'm unconscious. I'm working it out subconsciously, or am I just perceiving the world?
Mm.
I feel I am perceiving time whilst asleep. Internal body clock, that's subconscious. I'm perceiving the world as a living organism
Yeah. And there is specifying information that just
that you can
is
detect.
available to us that we detect.
Time, tau. Tau is specifying information, thus time is specifying information. Yes, light is a huge impact factor when it comes to working out the time of day, especially for those of us that have sight. But for those of us that don't have sight, how do you know when it's time to go to sleep?
Mm.
And those sorts of things I find really interesting. And there was a thought experiment put inside of the Discord, which I'm going to share with you now. And we'll discuss this because I
Is
feel
this
like this.
is this in conversations, chat? Like,
It's in an archived question under understand how learning works, and it's an ongoing
oh,
thread.
this one. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We were speaking about this last time.
Yeah, it continued. The most recent message is a thought experiment. I don't like the first message, but I love how the text has shifted from massive
Mm.
paragraphs to sentences directing at intention and attention of communicated points. So, define conscious unconscious as you see it, right? Then describe how you get to a familiar place in your home. Really has to be a place you go every day. Do you remember doing that every day? And they didn't
Not
put a question mark there, but I
necessarily,
think it is a question mark.
not necessarily do I remember doing that, but I remember the information available to me during, like the information that I have perceived at that moment in time when I'm walking past. Usually, when I am walking to a place, I perceive things and go, "Oh yeah, that reminds me of this thing. Oh yeah, that reminds me of this thing." Kind of going back to that whole like ADHD presumed thing where you walk in and this is a thing and this is a thing and there's too much information. We're having loads of stuff being moved around in our house at the moment, and my mood changed, and I was less able to just function as I normally would because there was so much specifying information that I was attuning to that I could not. I needed a constraint because it was stressing me out.
Too much variability. The complexity
Yeah,
was increased above your level of expertise at that point in time. And
yeah.
so you required task simplification, not decomposition. I don't know whether you watched my recent video on balance bikes. No. Task simplification is better than task decomposition. But in a similar way to what you're describing, I broke my chair the other day, and now I don't have a left arm to put my arm on.
Mm,
And I am, I mean, I am used to some extent, not putting my arm down now because it's been almost a day. And when I'm paying attention to it, I recognize that, yeah, there's nothing to put my arm there. But sometimes when I come to sit back down, and I have done the same sorts of behaviors multiple times, and I put my arms down to go up. I can only do it on my right side to lean down. I can't lean on my left side. And so I try to lean, but as I'm perceiving the environment, I recognize, oh, it's not there. So I move to my right and then come over. So I go left to right rather than just go like up, if that makes sense.
mm.
So am I remembering it? How am I remembering it? Do I remember it? Those questions are very difficult, I feel, to answer no matter what the approach you take in explaining.
Mm.
Do you remember doing that every day? I don't remember every experience I have ever had or every piece of specifying information that I have ever detected because that is redundant. Your brain chooses not to do that if we come from a cognitive psychology perspective. If we're coming from an ecological perspective, what is the point? There is no reason to use this information to get to my goal. which I feel
Once I need to use that information, then I will use that. That information will just it will happen. I will perceive it, and then off I go.
yeah, which I feel relates to the dancing, was it ape or monkey or whatever it is in the video? I don't know whether you've seen it. Most people have, where you're asked to count the amount of passes that
Yeah,
a team makes with a basketball or a netball or whatever it is, and then a dancing monkey goes across the screen, and people don't see the dancing monkey because they're paying attention to the amount of passes that the team make.
yeah,
Well, the goal-directed behavior there is to count the passes. And if it is a new experience for you, that is where your attention is. If it's not a new experience for you, then whether you remember the number or not, you don't need to expend as much energy paying attention to the information because you're more familiar with that experience. Thus, you have free energy using the free energy principle. You have free energy to expend elsewhere, or there is more available energy for you to expend elsewhere. You can pay attention to multiple things. You can calibrate your attenuation elsewhere, i.e., you can see the monkey. Two
yeah.
different ways of explaining the same experience, neither of which use memory stores.
Boom.
One coming from cognitive psychology, one coming from ecological psychology. Both of them still have different base assumptions, but both of them are using either active inference or direct perception in explaining the experiences, not brain storage rubbish. And breathe. So, uh,
Carrying on.
yes. Is there anything you wanted to add there?
No, just a hearty agreement.
Very nice. I'm going to skip a couple of lines in this message, and then they say, is breathing subconscious when you are awake? What happens when you are asleep? Can you hold your breath forever? Why did you start breathing? All of those questions in one line. So, first question, is breathing subconscious when you are awake? Are you thinking about breathing? Yes.
Yeah,
Because if you think about not breathing, i.e., don't breathe, you know you're not breathing. You can't not know you're not breathing.
yeah, and also from someone with asthma, you definitely can tell when your breath is shallow. You can definitely tell, like that all of that stuff. When I'm struggling to breathe, I know I'm struggling to breathe.
Yeah. It's not a subconscious thing. Like we breathe, especially when we're behaving. For example, talking. When we talk, we breathe when we talk, and we change when we breathe so that we can talk.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you end up not saying the words because you're breathing. So, yes, we are in conscious control of our breath when we are awake, I would argue.
yeah, I would
We,
agree. I very often want to finish a sentence before I breathe, which means I speak incredibly fast so that I can breathe at the end. And there's a
but don't
really
you
long.
forget to breathe
No, I just choose not to at that point.
to emphasize the point.
Like I just choose not to emphasize the point. So I just do it that way. And then when I need to breathe, I'll stop. Sometimes it means I stop halfway through a sentence, just like that, which was funny. Um, like
Coincidence.
I know, right?
Or
Otherwise,
was it
I
deliberate?
don't. Maybe my subconscious told me to do it.
That's where I was going. Yeah, the second of these four questions is what happens when you are asleep? I assume referring to breathing. I would
I'm
still argue we are consciously breathing.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Okay, we're in agreement there. Can you hold your
Sorry, would you like a further explanation? I don't think it needs to be. It's like, yes. It's simple as, yes, of course we are. Because it just,
we breathe.
yeah,
We're organisms that require breath to survive
these are brilliant questions that are brilliantly simple to answer.
in the ecological approach.
Yeah, exactly. In the ecological approach, it's just, but yes, of course. Yes, of course. Yes, of course. We don't need to make this any more complicated than it is. Why do we have to have multiple different subsections and sections and labels and sub-labels and micro labels and mini labels for existence?
Have you looked through the conversation to see I mentioned right at the start that the text has shifted, but they've also shifted with the way that they're describing their points as well. So it might be worth just looking through the conversation and see the evolution and development of the way that they are communicating with me. I think partly because of the way I'm communicating with them. I am getting to the point that they are making, the intention that they are making, and paying attention to specific words or
Mm,
uh, meanings that they are trying to convey or communicate to me. Uh, and yeah, I'm finding it very interesting looking at the communication as they're developing, especially
mm.
as English is both of the individual's second language inside of this conversation.
Yeah, it's really good.
So, third question then. I think this is more an emotional question, emotionally driven question
Mm,
from the conversation. Can
mm,
you hold your breath forever? I feel they know that's a no,
mm,
and it's an obvious no.
mm.
So, on reflection, why are they asking that question?
Yeah, that's what I was intrigued by.
I think that comes down to control of behavior.
Mm,
I feel that they would argue that we are in conscious control of breathing. And if we're in conscious control, we should be able to hold our breath forever as a tongue-in-cheek, sensationalized question, in which we all know that you can't hold your breath forever. You will end up breathing unless there is assistance from something else, whether it be a drug or something physical in the environment, another person, or something like water. But us as organisms, we are living organisms that try to survive. That's what we do. Perception and action being coupled as living organisms trying to survive. And so we try to breathe.
at a fundamental level, we live.
And I feel like this is going to relate to a conversation I had with a coach on Friday. They were,
Woo!
yeah, they were exposed to muscle memory a lot because of the algorithm. And
Sorry.
they struggled to argue against the logical points that were coming across from the cognitive psychology approaches, the traditional explanations. And
Mhm.
they didn't know the argument from an ecological
Mhm.
side. They recognized that there wasn't something right with the way that muscle memory was being described,
Mm,
but they couldn't work out why or
mm.
how to discuss this more critically. And the way that I explain, actually, how would you explain that? I'm going to ask you before I talk.
Cool.
How would you argue against traditional assumptions of muscle memory?
I would argue it from a point of if everything's not in the brain, like I'm thinking about guitar because that's probably the easiest one that I would fall through. It is me attuning to specifying information on the neck of the guitar. Like I am perceiving
Okay,
the
so
shape.
here scenario. I am someone that is following traditional assumptions, and I say that I have learned a song and it's just muscle memory now. My hands and fingers just play the song. I don't have to think about the song. It's automatic. It's just muscle memory.
You're thinking about different things. Usually, when you're playing a song, um, specify it.
Because that's how people in music describe muscle memory.
Yeah, it is. It is
And
very much so.
it's how they describe muscle memory in sport as well. Oh, you can ride a bike, it's just muscle memory. And that's the argument that this coach was struggling with. How would you address that in music? Oh, it's just muscle memory now. The song is just muscle memory.
Yeah, but it's not because you're still thinking about it.
But why is it not?
You're, but that's the hard bit. That's actually quite a tricky one to kind of because what if the body has memory and is remembering the information? Like it's just remembering information. It is perceiving information. It is
Mm.
it,
So muscle memory, does it exist? Yes or no?
hmm. I think I would say yes.
I agree. Why?
Because our body the I don't know. I'm not
See,
sure.
yeah, no, it's interesting. And this is why I found it an interesting conversation, which I'll link back to what we were talking about earlier. Um, is that right before we had this siloed conversation, we were talking about the organism, the perceiving and acting organism. And so when people say
Body isn't the position of our body a perceptive system? I can't remember the word right now, but that
haptic,
is just part of our perceptive system. Like
haptic.
that is perception. It's haptic.
Mm.
So that is what we're that's the memory. It's a system. It's the perceptive. It's that and the relationship between the two.
Sort of. But if we are an organism,
Mm,
ecologically speaking, if we're an organism that remembers experiences,
mm.
memory, in muscle memory, we would replace to remembering. And muscle, we would replace with organism. And so when you argue, or when someone argues, oh, it's just muscle memory,
It's
we
just
would
organism remembering.
we would say you're just remembering how to do the thing.
Mm,
We don't need muscle memory separate from cognitive memory because it's just remembering.
yeah,
So the concept of muscle memory isn't required in ecological psychology because we would describe it as the process of remembering.
yeah.
So it's not
No,
that it doesn't exist, it does exist. We just don't need to separate it from all the other types of remembering because it is just us
remembering.
remembering.
I just remember how to put the position of my fingers in a certain position, and then I know
You're
that that.
perceiving and acting through the behavior. Through time,
Yeah,
you are perceiving and acting through whatever music it is, whether that comes from you playing the notes and you remembering what notes come next in order to elicit some behavior that sounds like a song that know
yeah.
in air quotes there. Uh, and so my question to sort of argue, to debate against those that use muscle memory as a concept is, do muscles have a brain? And they will inevitably say no. My next question would be, okay, so what part of the muscle is remembering? And most of the time, when I've had this conversation, we'll sort of go through various questions and we'll converge on an agreed point that the body is remembering how to perform the behavior. Which leads me to question, why do we need to put the brain at the center then of
Mm.
all of the other learning experiences if our body is remembering as an organism? And that is normally where I leave the conversation, or I
Mm.
encourage them to explore ecological psychology because it better explains how we learn.
Mm.
And that is how I would navigate that conversation because it's not that muscle memory doesn't exist, because I think it does exist, but it exists as a part of the process of remembering as an organism.
Mm.
Does that help
Yeah,
you?
yeah, yeah. It's so funny, like from my experience of discussing this with other people, is everything becomes so much simpler. Like it feels it's just yeah, okay, cool. What once when you break it down, it always turns down to like experience, remembering, acting.
Yeah. There was, I think I mentioned this last week. There was a conversation with between Julia Blau and a person that I don't remember the name of because I wasn't paying attention to the name because most names are pointless in remembering. But they were on the enactivist side, and they were discussing the ecological approach and traditional assumptions from cognitive psychology and various other fields. And they were discussing how ecological psychology doesn't break apart so many of these concepts, these ideas. They keep them together. It is a holistic approach. So instead of using muscle memory, episodic memory, declarative memory, procedural memory, other memory, normal memory, it's just remembering. You are remembering. You are a organism, a perceiving, acting organism behaving in an environment and are remembering experiences. That's all you need.
Yeah, and that is enough.
And it's effective as well, because when you go into the specifics, now you're adding contextual information which relates to the organism environment relationship, which can then be calibrated. Education of attention and intention. We've already mentioned that in perceiving and acting to calibrate your attention and intention towards behavior, which requires remembering because it's over a time period, because it's
And
dynamic.
all of this is something that no matter who you are is possible. It doesn't matter. Like the labels, the shit that gets piled upon us just doesn't matter. We all
It can
exist.
matter. It
It can,
Yeah, it can
but
matter, but it doesn't need to have as much of an
yeah,
impact as it does.
yeah.
That's the way I would word it.
The impact is lessened because we all find ways around the conditions the conditions that we may have that have real influence. They do have an influence on our lives, but if, for example, for me, I don't think about having two eyes and the difference because there isn't one. I have no reference point, so I just work within what I can do, and I'm aware that I will bump into things on one side and etc. etc. And as I'm continuing to experience my hearing changes and that I am understanding more about what I need with that and how that shifts and changes because I'm experiencing it. Through experience, I learn.
Do you always learn through experience?
Well, yeah,
I
yeah,
I love the tone. Well, yeah, duh, of course.
yeah, because how else would you learn? You can't learn without experiencing.
Yes. And this is one of the myths in the sports coaching book, Myths of Sports Coaching, relates to questions. All questions lead to learning. Hmm. Well, depends how you define learning, but broadly speaking, I agree. Some questions are really poor and don't effectively aid the learning process, but you are always learning from questions because you're always experiencing. So I
Yeah.
was like, I agree with the point that you're trying to make in the book, but I disagree with the philosophical base that you've built this question from.
I was having a discussion with someone recently who was really struggling because their health was not great. And I'm like, cool.
To clarify there, are you saying health because you believe it's health, or are you saying health because it's physical health, not mental health? Because I don't like physical mental health separation, which is why I say
Yeah.
health. When you say health, you meaning the health of the individual?
Yeah, the health of the individual
Okay.
together. Yeah. Um,
I
and
wanted
I'm
to
like,
clarify because some people listening might go, "Oh, physical health," and I'm like, maybe it's actually a combination of the two.
yeah, yeah, it's a
Yes,
combination of the two.
that's what I thought.
And we were having discussions around how do you do things when you have a lifelong condition that can let up sometimes and then doesn't other times. Like, how do you do things? And I've been asked that multiple times by, oh, well, how do you just do things? And I'm like, I don't have a choice. I'm just doing them because that's just how I operate. I do because I am.
I
Like,
find that really interesting. A lifelong condition.
yeah,
I mean, it requires a diagnosis of said condition,
yes, yeah,
and that diagnosis then assumes there is an issue,
yes,
and the issue assumes comparison between action capabilities of individuals.
yes,
But action capabilities between individuals are all different because we are all unique.
yes,
So we all have lifelong conditions.
yes.
So I'm trying to understand the logic. Like, yes, you have a lifelong condition that, in comparison to other individuals, may disable you from doing things, but it's the same as anyone else. They have different disabling qualities or capabilities or inabilities because of the way that the society has been formed, created. That's a dynamic between organisms. It's not just humans, it's all organisms. All organisms will fight for survival, and that shapes the dynamics of social interaction. Like it's nothing unique to humans. Yeah. And
But
so
we're
when
special. We're special.
no, you can feel special, but what all
No, 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 no. Humans are completely unique. Our experiences are completely and utterly unique. No one thinks like us.
I love I love the irony. We are completely unique. No one thinks like us. Huh.
I know. I know. It's something that I'm working on a post around now around neurodiversity. Even just the term assumes difference,
Yes.
except we have now taken neurodiversity as an us, as a everyone behaves this way, when they are multiple diagnoses which have different meanings being weird as hell when you look at them, and also we're now lumping people in these groups of, oh, I have ADHD. This means I am this, I am that, I am this, I am that.
I am A, which equals banana. No.
Mm,
No, A is a letter, not a fruit. They are two completely different things.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's what I feel people are doing with a lot of the labels and categories that they put themselves within. It is one of the
It
reasons that I'm.
never from because I was there fairly early in it coming out. It never started that way. Like that, I don't think that was the intention.
Are you talking about the intention from Judy, singer?
Yeah. It was
Because
to,
because the original intention was to bring awareness
yeah,
to a group of individuals.
yeah.
So
I
the
don't
original intention was to group individuals according to a diagnosis or an inability to function within the society that we had.
know. Maybe it was then. I don't know.
But that's the thing. The social intention was that. That was her social intention to say, hey, society, we need to do something about this. We need to include, be equitable in some way towards individuals that are less able to do these things that we are requiring them to do, i.e.,
Mm,
support them, help them to do things that they struggle to do, and I would argue vice versa. Those that are more able to do other things to help the other individuals. But philosophically speaking, when you listen to her talk, she doesn't think that they are a subset or a group of people over there. It is a socially constructed label that we as a society created. And in order to fight against it, we need to fight within the bounds, the constraints of the societal rules, which is where a lot of the conflicts in politics and medical procedures and all the different industries we have. That's the problems. The problems are because we've created so many social constructs that we have to create more social constructs within them to fight within the rules. Why can't we just peel it back?
Mm.
Why can't we just peel it back? And that's what some
That
people are
would be
arguing to do.
nice. That would be nice.
Peel back so many of the assumptions, but I feel the fear of people abusing what rules are in place prevents the regression of rules and safety and constraints.
I'm not even sure that's true.
From my experience, if like sports coaching, if I was to say to the majority of coaches that have done their safeguarding, could you run a session, adults and children in the same session? They will say no. They will say no because it goes against safeguarding. Why does it go against safeguarding? Well, it's unfair. What's unfair? An 18-year-old with a 16-year-old? A 61-year-old against a 5-year-old? Well, what if the 15-year-old went through puberty really, really early and the 18-year-old has a condition that they don't go through puberty or they're going through it late, or maybe they have a condition where they are really weak? Now, is it unfair for the adult against the child or the child against the adult? We're adding in a constraint according to a socially constructed biological number, chronological age, and saying, oh no, adults can't be with children. Why? The fear
And
of
also,
backlash.
even just in what that was an assumption of competition.
Uh-huh.
Like there was that just like not even going to the social, but there was an assumption of competition.
Yep.
This person is not the same as this person. We must compare those people, and so we have to behave differently because they're competing, and it's not fair if someone else competes against another person.
Yep. And that's what I mean. Like there are so many fears that people assume before you even start that begs the question, what if we do it and nothing goes wrong? And that's kind of how I'm running Eastbourne Trampoline right now. Like, I have a 38-year-old Down syndrome, a 11-year-old profoundly deaf, a 14-year-old, according to social constructs, normal girl, a 16-year-old boy with various how would I describe it? Socially constructed labels classed as disabilities, um, and then a couple of other adults, all in the same session. And I've had no issues, none whatsoever. Oh, but it's the sport that you're doing. It's trampoline. It's because they're all separated. No, they're not. They all see each other. They're all in the space. They all know what's going on. It's the fear. Granted, I do have some worries about some individuals with their interactions, but I think that is because of the abilities or inabilities of certain individuals in certain contexts. If you have someone that is very unskilled at communicating with individuals and you ask them to communicate with someone else that's extremely unskilled at communication, what's likely going to happen? Conflict.
Yeah.
That's not because of an age or because of a disability. It's because of their current expertise in something that I'm asking them to do. Not on the trampoline, a social skill, a human skill. So my fear comes from the skill of the individuals rather than the socially constructed labels. Their action capabilities rather than their label, their
Mm,
category, their disability.
mm.
Went on a little bit of a rant there.
That's good.
It's good
Good.
to rant, is it?
Oh yeah, why not?
I'm so glad I don't have to read that. My sister just sent me a message, and then the second message would scratch that, so I'm just not going to read the first one. Okay. But
Thank you.
yes, yes. But yeah, so when it comes to the subconscious and the unconscious, Do you think we have anything that is sub or unconscious?
No, not really. No.
So you think you're consciously aware all of the time?
Yeah,
I agree. And I feel like that could be a very bold statement that we are always conscious.
I guess.
Well, when people are asleep and nurses go round in like hospital beds or friends and family go round, people would argue, oh, they're unconscious, they're out of the world sort of thing. And we're arguing, actually, no, they're conscious.
Yeah.
And I think I'm exploring this as I'm saying this. If we argue that we are conscious while we are asleep, then the learning that happens while we are asleep is still conscious, which begs the question, do we require to sleep for all of the learning? No. And so the REM sleep that supposedly does lots of our learning for us, according to the sleep research and studies, is it that we require sleep? Or is it that we require attention to the experiences? Because if our conscious attention is directed solely at experiences that we've had and not detecting specifying information through our senses, which we could describe as sleep,
Hmm.
that might be why we develop a lot the next day. Like, if we describe practice, like deliberate practice, we are attuning, we are paying attention to external stimulus, detecting external stimulus from the
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah.
That is more effective than not doing it. And so when we are thinking about an experience that we are not currently doing, thinking about
Hmm.
actions that had happened, if we pick a timescale in the past, how do we deliberately practice that if we are required to detect specifying information within the behaviors we're currently doing? Well, we're limited on resources.
Mm.
Whereas when we are asleep, we can consciously pay attention to those past
Yeah.
experiences. I'm liking this way of thinking.
That's cool. That's really cool.
So we are consciously learning when we're asleep. Oh, that's a bold claim.
Oh, that's a something.
That's going to take a while to dissect, I think, for some people,
Mm.
because some people have built their entire research platform on unconscious, subconscious, hallucinations,
Mm.
matching reality to lived experience. Yeah, I want to explore that a bit further, but I'm looking at the time and might have to end this shortly. Is there anything else you'd like to add or anything you'd like to explore when it comes to conscious learning?
Not that can be done in a short amount of time.
We've got a few minutes.
That's not long enough.
Okay, fine.
That is slightly too constrained. The
Okay,
time
okay.
scale does not match.
You need to drastically increase your calibration and your expertise now. Uh,
Yes.
just 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 be an AI and summarize all the information
Oh
and
yeah.
blurt something out.
Yeah.
And because you're AI, it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong, because you're
Oh yeah, of
AI.
course
So
not.
so
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
got to be useful.
Oh yeah. We are ending on two very spicy things on two separate things at the same time. It's quite funny.
Yes, yes. Right. Thanks for listening, everyone. Hopefully you've enjoyed it.